everyone, I'm Janeisha John, and welcome to another episode of Rediscover St. John. Now, for the past 5 weeks, we've explored many different sites within the national park system on St. John. We've hiked popular trails and toured magnificent estates that today still hold the stories of their past. Now, in our last episode, we explored Lamshure Bay and the ruins on the estate that were established in the 1700s. Today, we'll explore Greater Lamshure Bay and about the nationally significant science station that has been in existence for over 40 years. We will also recap a great season of exploration and rediscovery. The Lamshure Bay estate is located on the southern coast of St. John. Most of the surrounding land, as is the case with most areas within the national park, is undeveloped. What this provides is a unique opportunity for visitors to get a sense of what the bay was like centuries ago. But juxtaposed to this feature is an aspect of the bay that gives scientists insight on what future civilizations may encounter with development. If you remember, the last time we were here in this area, we learned about these ruins, the remains of what was the Lamshure Bay estate. Established in the 18th century to produce cotton, but later converted to a sugar estate. Today, we are traveling several hundred meters east of these ruins to learn about Greater Lamshure Bay and the environmental research station it contains.
Lamshure Bay, and then we're actually looking over at Greater Lamshure. The name of Lamshure is, I guess, debatable. But one possible theory is that the bay was originally named Limeshore Bay, and that slowly changed to Lamshure. It's a wonderful place. We're really secluded, and like I said before, there's no development going on in the surrounding watershed. So what we see now is as close as you're going to find anywhere else on the island is how it was, 100 years ago. One other really interesting thing about this particular bay is it was host to Project Tektite back in the late 1960s. In the fall of 1968, the Navy Marine unit, the Seabees, constructed camp to house the support staff for this project. That's how VIERS was actually established.
VIERS, or the Virgin Islands Environmental Research Station, was established in Greater Lamshure Bay in 1966 by the College of the Virgin Islands. Its purpose was to provide an ideal location for ecological research. This station, as Jamie mentioned, hosted the 1969 and 1970 Tektite 1 and 2 projects.
And what that was an underwater habitat for researchers to actually live underwater. The first project was Tektite 1, where 4 aquanauts stayed under for 60 days and they never once came up to the surface. So what that enabled them to do was spend a lot of time underwater and being able to study 24 hours a day essentially what was going on the reef and with all the different types of fish and lobsters and things like that. That was actually stationed right around Cabri Point, so on outer Greater Lamshure. That project was ended in 1970.
Today, there's a small museum within the VIERS campsite dedicated to the history of the Tektite projects. Inside the museum, you can find pictures and articles of the scientists and the project. There are also artifacts and scale models of some of the instruments and tools used during the program. This painting depicts the underwater station and the aquanauts Jamie told us about. These are photos of the scientists appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show, a popular American variety show that ran from 1948 to 1971. Here, they're shaking hands with VI Governor Cyril E. King. Tektite 1 and 2 were also featured in major magazines like National Geographic and Life magazine. A reason why the project gained so much attention is the fact that it was the first nationally sponsored Scientists in the Sea project. It was also the longest of its kind and was the first to feature a team of women aquanauts. The main purpose of Project Tektite was to study the behavior of a small crew in isolated conditions for the National Aeronautic and Space Administration and the U.S. Navy.
Right now we are standing at the Marine Lab, which is part of VIERS, the Virgin Island Environmental Resource Station. The Marine Lab itself was built back in the late 60s and was used for a number of different experiments and research purposes back then. And it hadn't been maintained for very long. But about 5 years ago now, I think it was, the volunteers from VIERS and with some resources donated from the U.S. Geological Survey, the entire facility was pretty much overhauled.
Around this particular area, this is the resource facility. Most of the resources deal with the marine environment, and we have scientists from all over the world come here to work in the national park in this part of the island. And this resource have an impact on the Caribbean. In other words, all the Caribbean islands get our research from here, and we share with our research and they share with their research in terms of scientific information. So for example, like Antigua, St. Kitts, or Montserrat can learn from what we're doing here, and we can learn from them.
We have many research groups coming down from the States, mostly from universities. We also have a lot of high school groups that come down from the stateside. We have some local groups that come down as well. But all of the volunteers, their primary job while they're here is to take care of those researchers and those school groups and those other types of groups while they stay here. So that means cooking for them, cleaning up. So my job is to make sure that the volunteers are organized and can provide the services for those paying guests. Especially in the past few years, there's been a lot of different projects going on. Currently, we have a researcher from the University of San Diego who is the field technician for this project based in Lamshure Bay and Coral Bay. And what they're looking at is runoff rates from developed areas in the watershed and then undeveloped. So they're comparing and contrasting sedimentation in the bays from areas in the watershed. So Lamshure being obviously in the park, there isn't any development going on. Whereas Coral Bay, there's a lot of development. So we're seeing a lot of differences in the sediment levels, and that's a problematic for the reefs. Covers up the reefs and causes lots of problems for them.
And that would teach us, planning for the islands, how to plan the island in terms of development. How many houses, or how many man-made structure is acceptable to have a balance between the environment and humans' needs. So that's why it's very important to have places like this. Is a research laboratory on the outside.
The U.S. Geological Survey comes down quite a bit. They do a lot of research on the different types of fish down here. Montclair State University, they're studying seagrass habitat and mangrove habitat. And with the deterioration of mangroves, a lot of the fish populations are moving out into the seagrasses and vice versa. So there's a change in habitat for a lot of animals based on what's been happening with development on the land.
A lot of research are conducted here in this particular area. And the research impacted, let's say, the Caribbean and other parts of the world.
Wow, that's interesting.
And again, many other parts of the world were able to develop their home or their land or their property just from the research from here.
It's amazing.
And it's sad that we who live here, we do not know that. And we will see this area here and say, wow, it's very pretty.
It's pretty.
Let's develop it. But you don't realize it's a laboratory in itself, and it helps us in preserve what you have and developing the island to be ecotourism or heritage tourism.
So it's good to know about the
It's good to know about the environment.
We make drastic changes.
Many times people look at laboratories as indoors, but the laboratory outdoors too, and it's an outdoor laboratory.
It's amazing to know that such a huge project was conducted right here in the Virgin Islands at Greater Lamshure Bay, and that studies are still being conducted today at that site. I had a great time learning about the area and the Tektite projects. Make sure you take some time out to visit Lamshure Bay and the VIERS campsite and museum. It's been an absolute joy exploring the island of St. John. Although small in mass, it contains an abundance of historical significance and natural beauty.
These trees grow along stream beds or guts. And many years ago, the tree was used for kayak. They cut it from this side and go right up, and they make canoe out of the tree.
Okay.
And in fact, in some literature mentioned they have close to around 50 men. So that's a huge tree.
Wow.
And they can kayak from South America and come all up in the Caribbean region. These stones were put there about 200 years ago by the enslaved Africans, and one of the reasons they keep in animals.
The facial features are real broad, like the lips and the nose, so you know, like they resemble, I guess, our ancestors.
The most significant is the petroglyphs, which were early rock carvings done by Taino Indians in the early thousands, 1000 through 1400 AD, and they are seen nowhere else in the Virgin Islands.
Over the years, there was different controversy how these petroglyphs get here.
Okay.
But these petroglyphs are African. This is the steam engine, but before the steam engine, it was the animal mill.
Okay.
The animal mill was here where it grind the cane. What happened starting from the 1700s, the 1800s, they start off with the windmill and the animal mill. And then later on, they advanced to the steam engine.
for sugar growing, there was one more big important step, and that was to create level land on these hillsides, and you do that by terracing. Picture St. John with virtually no trees, but with giant stone walls everywhere, with 10, 12-foot sugarcane growing on those level areas. A totally different site as what we would see today. Growing commonly in sandy, open, sunny areas are trees known as starvation fruit laying around. The birds will eat it, the donkeys will eat it. You could eat it, but it wouldn't be very nutritious and it wouldn't be very enjoyable. So you'd only eat it if you were starving. And if you were to pick it up and smell it, you would see why they call it starvation fruit. Smells like rotten cheese or...
Smells terrible.
Because this is the art of work to just do this here.
Beautiful.
The walls are extremely thick. And you can see more coral inside in here and a different kind of design of the coral. Downstairs, there is a dungeon downstairs of the window. As you're in here now, you're feeling the breeze. The wind coming from off the Atlantic
You
Ocean.
think it was designed that way for
It was designed, first of all, because this is a windmill. It's designed to turn.
Okay.
That's part of the sugar process. The wind comes from Atlantic and turn the wheel on the outside. This is the dungeon where they used to keep slaves. If you misbehave, you could be in here for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. And of course, once they shut the door, you got people, everything here is in darkness.
Do you know about how many people they would probably hold at a time?
With this one here, liquid can hold more than 10. And as I mentioned, you could be here for quite a while. In 1733, when they have the slavery boat on St. John, and there's two sections of St. John where the slaves jump off, and this is one a significant area. Basically what happened, that particular year was a very bad year. When the Danish government, they established 19 code, it's laws. For example, if you run away, if you're being caught, they can cut off your neck and cut your foot. Other thing too, that same year, there was a hurricane. And after the hurricane, a whole lot of bugs ate up the crops. And the slave was really unrest because of these codes. And of course, they decided to take over the entire island.
Okay, Mr. Davis, this is finally it.
Yep, this is Ram's Head. And when they got here, the Islamicum jumped over these cliffs for the freedom instead of being captured.
Much like Mary's Point.
Like Mary Point. Now, when they did that, we today would consider being they commit suicide. But back then, to them, when they jumped over, they got back to Africa.
So, Mr. Davis, what's the name of this plant right here?
You call it fish poison. This particular plant goes way back from the Native American here in the Caribbean. Here in St. John and throughout the Virgin Islands, this plant was used by the Taínos, so-called Carib or Calinos, and enslaved African up to the early 1960s. They would take the plant, the bark of it, they peel it off, they put it in a sack. And like, for example, the pond right over there, or along the coast or in stream, they shake it in the stream, and what it does, it cut off the oxygen in the water, and the fish come and tap the water, and they pick up the fish. This salt pan, this is in St. John. This is the pan that makes salt. It starts all in the year between April, May, June. need a dry period. This particular plant makes salt. So historically, the folks in St. John come here to collect salt to cook. We call it rock salt. And this is the only pan now we have in the Virgin Islands that makes salt.
Really?
All the other salt pans, for example, like in the Great Pan in St. Croix, over the years, salt disappeared. But here, this is protected.
The diving's absolutely amazing. There's, like I said, there's a nice little ledge system just on the other side, and so a lot of reef fish like to hide underneath the ledges. And at night they all come out and play and feed. So we get a lot of pufferfish, lobsters, eels, sturgeon majors. We get a lot of marine life out there.
We just got up from a dive. We were under for almost an hour, and we were swimming down there with seeing all kinds of fish. We saw schooling French grunts. We saw a couple of lobsters, and then Rashawn pointed out a crab at the end. That was really cool on the way back. A big clinging crab underneath the ledge. Every place has its own like special assemblage of the different marine organisms, whether they're coral, fish, or creatures. But one of the things that I find in the U.S. Virgin Islands is just so many of our reefs here are shallow in St. John and St. Thomas that we have a lot of sunlight, a lot of color, especially on the underside of ledges where the sun doesn't shine. That's where the really colorful encrusting sponges that are red, orange, yellow. So we have a lot of warm colored creatures, coral I should say, and that makes it really colorful.
If you've never done this before, you should definitely come out and do this. This is just a totally different world.
I want to thank you for joining me on this season of Rediscover St. John, and I hope that you join me as we continue our adventure to the capital island of St. Thomas. So until then, always remember to cherish your home, this beautiful island, but most of all, cherish each other.
Rediscover St. John is underwritten in part by Keneal Bay, a Rosewood resort.